Hey, what's up guys, it's DarkArmedDuelist and today we're going to be doing a Zefra deck profile. So I'm really excited to show you guys this deck because this deck was actually suggested to me by one of my patrons, Gloomba. And this deck is a really awesome deck because basically it's a fusion between like 4 or 5 different archetypes. Everything from Shaddolls, Teller Knights, Yang Zing, and even Ritual Beasts are in this deck, which is really cool to combine all those different archetypes into one really awesome Pendulum deck. So without further ado guys, don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, hit the bell so you can become part of Notification Squad, and definitely check out the Patreon down in the description below for all those awesome rewards, like your name script for every single video, getting a signed cards in the mail, and even getting to request a deck profile every single month you're a patron, along with test hints. And definitely give Gloomba some love down in the comments down below for suggesting such an awesome deck profile. So let's get straight on into it. So first off, we're going to be playing 3 copies of Zefra. So Zefra is one of the cards that you want to see in your hand right away because it helps you pendulum summon out your monsters, because it has the ability that during the main phase you can add a Zefra pendulum monster from your deck to your extra deck face up, and if you do, change this card's pendulum scale to be the same as the monster that you added to your extra deck, which is really good to be able to kind of copy a pendulum scale so you can have the exact pendulum scale that you need when you need it. The monster effect doesn't come up that often and you're never really going to summon this card to your field, so you don't really have to worry about the monster effect. We then play 3 copies of Zefra Nui. So Zefra Nui is a really good card in this deck, and one of the cards that you're going to be pendulum summoning all the time. Honestly, the Yang Zing cards are the best ones in this deck. This card has a pendulum effect, and all of your Zefra monsters share the ability that you cannot pendulum summon monsters except for their particular archetype and Zefra monsters, which is totally fine because we're just going to be pendulum summoning those monsters to our side of the field anyways. But this card has a monster effect of when this card is pendulum summoned, or when this card is destroyed by battle or by card effect, while this card is in the monster zone, you can add 1 Yang Zing or Zefra Spell or Trap from your deck to your hand, which is a really good effect just to be able to search your Zefra Divine Strike, Oracle of Zefra, or any of the cards that you really need for this particular plays to go off. We then play 3 copies of Treasure of the Yang Zing. This card can actually turn one of our other monsters into a tuner monster, which helps us go into our plays, like into a copy of Ravenous Croco Dragon, to be able to go in for all sorts of really awesome plays, especially if you get both of these on your side of the field, which is really good because then you can go full combo where you can get upwards of like 2 to 3 negates on your side of the field and set up for all sorts of different swarm plays later on. We then play 2 copies of Zefra Thubin. This card is really good in the deck too because it has the ability to, if this card is normal, flipped, or pendulum summon, then you can target one other Teller Knight monster or Zefra monster in your monster zone or pendulum zone and one face-up card your opponent controls and destroy them. And this card comes in really handy because it pops 2 cards on the field, pops one of ours and one of our opponents, which is really helpful for us to out certain cards that we just don't want to have to deal with. We then play a single copy of the high scale of the Teller Knight monsters. This card comes in handy as well because it has the ability, if this card is normal or flipped or pendulum summon, then you can target one other Teller Knight or Zefra monster in your monster zone or pendulum zone and one set card your opponent controls, and you destroy those cards, which is really good to just pop set cards your opponent controls and just give you a 1900 attack point monster. We then play a single copy of the Shaddol Zefra monster. This card is just a 1-up to me. I don't think you need it at any more than 1, and has a really neat effect that if this card is pendulum summoned or sent to the graveyard, you can target 1 card on either player's pendulum zone and return that target to the hand to basically reset your scales so you can put the exact scale that you want and basically get a monster that you might need back into the hand. So I play it as a 1-of in here. We then play a single copy of the Ritual Beast Tamer Zefra Piccola. This card is really good as a low scale because you need more low scales in here than your high scales, to be honest, because you're trying to get your Zefrath to send your copy of your Zefra Nui to the extra deck and then lay one of these down beside it. So this card comes in handy because what it does is when this card is normal summon or pendulum summon, you can target a Ritual Beast or Zefra monster in the graveyard, and then you get to special summon it but destroy it during the end phase, which is still pretty good. It doesn't come up all that often to actually bring them back from the graveyard, but it does come up every so often, so you do play it as a 1-up, and the scale is very important. We then play a single copy of the Zefra Windy. Zefra Windy has the ability, when she's normal or pendulum summoned, you can add a face-up Zefra monster from your extra deck back to your hand, which comes up a lot now in this deck because you're going to be adding cards to your extra deck with Zefrath, so this card comes in very handy to be able to grab those cards back, so you don't have to pendulum summon them into link zones or into zones that into the extra monster zone. We then play 3 copies of Fairy Tale Luna. Now this is the card that I chose to play in this deck for the normal summon slot. This card comes in very handy because when it's normal summon, you get to add another Fairy Tale Luna from your deck to your hand. You can add a monster that has 1850 attack points to your hand that's a spellcaster type monster, but the only one we're playing in the deck is Fairy Tale Luna. But this card comes in really handy in the deck because it has the ability that you can target a face-up monster your opponent controls, and your opponent has to send one card of the monster's same name from their deck or extra deck to the graveyard to negate this effect. Otherwise, you bounce both this card and that monster back into the hand, which is really good because it's basically every single turn a walking compulsory evacuation device. So this card is definitely a 3 of in my book. We then play a single copy of the Gizmet Kaku, so we can go into our copy of our Sacred Tree Beast with our copy of Ravenous Croco Dragon. So this card comes in very handy for our combos that you guys will see in the test hands. One copy of Cyberstein. Cyberstein is a tech card that I play in this deck that lets us go into our Naturia fusion monster to be able to stop spells and traps. So this card is a really good card, and one of the cards you're going to put on the top of your deck with your copy of your Oracle of Zephyr. We then play 3 copies of Ash Blossom just to stop our opponent from touching the deck, and then we play 3 copies of Gamma and a single copy of Driver just to stop hand traps, because usually when we activate our copy of Zephyrath, our opponent is going to try and ash us or stop us in some way. So the copy of Gamma is basically here to make sure that we're going to get our plays to go off, and we can even synchro summon into a copy of Cyframe Lord Omega if we do pull this off during our turn. So that's it for the monsters. Let's get into the spells. So for the spells, we're going to be playing a single copy of Terraforming. Terraforming is basically here to get to our copy of our Oracle of Zephyr really quickly. We play a single copy of Called by the Grave to just stop hand traps. So this card comes in very handy to stop any hand trap that your opponent's going to throw against you. A single copy of Zephyr Path. Now this card is a great one of in this deck. Now this card has the ability that you activate this card only if you have 2 Zephyr cards in your Pendulum Zones with the same active Pendulum Scales of 1 and 7. So you have to have a 1 and a 7 in your Pendulum Scales to activate this card. And if this card is activated, you shuffle all monsters you control into the deck except for Zephyr monsters, which is usually just going to be what you're going to have on the field anyways when you actually go for this card. But it's a great control card because it has the ability that neither player can special summon monsters except from the hand or the extra deck. So your opponent can't special summon from graveyard, they can't special summon from the deck, they can't special summon from anywhere except from the hand or extra deck. And while you have a cards in your Pendulum Zone, this card cannot be targeted by card effects and destroy this card if a card's in your Pendulum Zone is destroyed. So this card comes in really handy to basically stop our opponent from summoning from the graveyard or from the deck, and it basically makes it so they kind of get locked down where they can special summon, which is why I play this card as a 1 of. We then play 3 copies of the Oracle of Zephyr, which this card is a great searcher in the deck because it has the ability that when this card is activated, you get to add a Zephyr monster from your deck to your hand. And then the only real effect that matters on this card is the synchro effect, that if you use a Zephyr monster to synchro summon a monster, you get to draw, or you get to place a card on top of your deck that's a monster, which basically makes it so you can add any monster from your deck to your hand when you synchro summon into your copy of your Ravenous Croco Dragon using your 2 Yang Zing monsters, which is the main play of the deck. We then play 3 copies of Zephyr Providence for the last 3 spells. This card is basically a searcher for the deck, lets you add any Zephyr card from your deck to your hand, and it also has the ability that if a Zephyr card you control would be destroyed and sent to the graveyard, then you can banish this card from your graveyard instead, but you can only use it once per turn. So that's it for the spells, guys. Let's get into the traps. So for the traps, we're going to be playing 2 copies of Zephyr War. Zephyr War is really good because it lets you target 1 Zephyr card you control and a card your opponent controls, and you destroy them both. And if you have 2 Zephyr cards in your Pendulum Zone, you can activate this card from your hand, essentially turning it into a pop hand trap, which is really good. We play a single copy of 9 Pillars, which 9 Pillars is really good to negate cards. This card basically lets you negate spell trap or monsters if you control a Yang Zing monster. You negate the activation if you do shuffle that card into the deck and destroy a Yang Zing you control, which will activate your copy of your level 6 Yang Zing monster, which is really good. And then we play a single copy of Zephyr Divine Strike. Zephyr Divine Strike is really good because it has the ability that when a spell trap or monster effect is activated, you can banish a Zephyr monster from your extra deck and negate the activation if you do destroy it. This card is going to be the main one that you're going to be searching out of the deck to be able to go in for the negation. So this card is very, very helpful in this particular build. So that's it for the traps, guys. Let's get into the extra deck. So for the extra deck, we're playing a single copy of Ravenous Croco Dragon. This card is going to be the one that you're going to be going into all the time to go in for those really good combos to go into Sacred Tree Beast and be able to search any card that you need from the deck with your copy of your Oracle of Zephyrs, which is why I play this card as a 1-of. Play a single copy of Cyframe Lord Omega just to rip a card out of our opponent's hand if we do use the copy of Gamma, which we usually will use the Gamma in the game. One copy of F.A. Dawn Dragster because it negates spells and traps. One copy of Metaphys Horus. Now this card is ridiculous on this deck because this card has the ability that if you use a Pendulum monster to summon this card, you can choose a monster they control and you get to gain control of it, which is really, really good just to be able to take opponents' monsters away from them to go into one of our XZ monsters that we're playing in this deck, because this card conveniently is a level 6. We then play a single copy of the Sacred Tree Beast, which is going to be usually the end board that we're going to try and summon this card to our side of the field, just to give us additional negations. One copy of Vampire Sheridan. Vampire Sheridan is the card that we're using usually with the Metaphys Horus to be able to take an opponent's monster away and then have the Metaphys Horus that's a level 6, and then you can treat one of the monsters that was originally controlled by your opponent as a level 6 to actually summon this card, which is really, really good. We then play a single copy of the Naturia Exterio. Naturia Exterio is here for the Cyberstein target to be able to summon to your side of the field by paying 5,000 life points. You can summon this card to your side of the field, but it is well worth the cost because it negates spells and traps, and this card is very, very good at shutting down boards. For the Link monsters, we're playing a single copy of Access Code. This could be a Borreload, it could be a Boral Sword, it could be any Link 4 that you want it to be. I play the Access Code because it comes in very handy to give me additional pops. One copy of Unicorn to spin stuff, Phoenix to pop spells and traps, the Earth Charmer because a lot of your monsters are Earth in this deck, so this card comes in very, very handy. One copy of Lambda to make your Gammas always live. IP Masquerena because the IP Masquerena can let you link summon during your opponent's turn. One copy of Gravity Controller because you can use cards in your extra monster zone to be able to summon this card into a Walking Compulse, which is really good. And then finally, a single copy of Alamirage because the Alamirage will get your copy of your Cyberstein off the field so you don't get OTK'd once you summon the Exterio. So that's it for the deck, guys. I hope you did enjoy it. It's a really fun deck. I'm really glad that Gloomba actually suggested this deck because this deck is a really fun deck to play around with and can really go in for some amazing control plays. Usually you're setting up with anywhere from 2 to 3 negates every single turn with some really powerful monsters on the field. And then finally, after you get those negations to stop your opponent, you're going in for the OTK. But you guys will definitely see that in the test hand. So anyways, guys, this is DarkArmedDuelist. Don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, hit the bell there so you can comment part of the notification squad, and definitely give Gloomba some love down in the comments down below, and we'll see you guys in the next video. See you later, guys.